The letter arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a cable bill and a perfume catalog. No return address, just my name written in precise, angular handwriting that made my stomach twist before I even opened it. I should have known right then that it would change everything. My name is Lila, and until that moment, I thought I had finally found my place in the Sinclair family. Sure, my mother-in-law Augusta still treated our weekly dinners like military operations, and my husband Grant still couldn't say no to her. But I was making it work. Or at least that's what I told myself. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of cream-colored paper, expensive stuff. The kind Augusta uses for her charity gala invitations. The message was short. Your mother-in-law isn't who you think she is. Check the family business accounts from 2019. Follow the money. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking more with each pass. The paper smelled faintly of Chanel No. 5, Augusta's signature scent. The same one she'd given me a bottle of last Christmas, with that little smile that said, "Now you can smell like a real Sinclair." I called Grant at his office, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hey, do you have access to the old business accounts? Why would you need those?" He sounded distracted, probably buried in work as usual. Just curious about something. For the family history project Augusta asked me to help with. The lie came easily, surprising me. You know Mom handles all that stuff. Maybe ask her? Of course. Everything went through Augusta. Even after 10 years of marriage, I still needed her permission to breathe the Sinclair air. Right, silly me, I said, already knowing I wouldn't ask her. See you at dinner? About that? Grant hesitated. Mom called. She wants us all over tonight. Says she has something important to discuss. My stomach dropped. Tonight? But it's not our usual night. You know how she gets. Better not to argue. I hung up and stared at the letter again. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Augusta never did anything without calculation, like a chess player always thinking 10 moves ahead. That evening, I pulled into the circular driveway of the Sinclair mansion, the letter burning a hole in my purse. Grant's car was already there, along with his father Gerald's Mercedes and, surprisingly, his brother Everett's Range Rover. Everett hardly ever came to family dinners anymore, not since Augusta had driven his wife Marissa away 2 years ago. The front door opened before I could ring the bell. Augusta stood there in her perfectly tailored navy dress, pearl necklace gleaming. Lila, darling. You're late. Traffic, I said, though I was actually right on time. She just liked to remind me that her time was more valuable than mine. Well, come in. We have matters to discuss. She turned and glided toward the dining room, leaving me to follow in her wake like always. The others were already seated, Grant looking uncomfortable, Gerald studying his water glass, and Everett radiating tension from the far end of the table. The air felt thick with unspoken words. Augusta took her place at the head of the table, smoothing her napkin across her lap. Now that we're all here, I have an announcement. She paused, her eyes finding mine with unsettling precision. There have been some concerning developments with the family business. Someone has been making inquiries about our financial records. My heart stopped. How could she know about the letter already? I hadn't told anyone. I intend to get to the bottom of this, she continued, her voice silk over steel. And I expect everyone's full cooperation in protecting our family's interests. As the others murmured their agreement, I felt the weight of Augusta's gaze. In that moment, I knew 2 things with absolute certainty. Someone was trying to expose Augusta's secrets, and she was ready to destroy anyone who helped them, even family. The game was on, whether I was ready or not. After Augusta's announcement, dinner became an exercise in calculated silence. The only sounds were silver against china and the tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. I watched as Gerald methodically cut his steak into precise squares, never once looking up at his wife. The salmon is excellent, I said, trying to break the tension. Is this a new recipe? Augusta dabbed her lips with her napkin. Our new chef. The last one couldn't follow simple instructions. Her eyes flickered to me. Some people never learn their place in an established household. Everett's fork clattered against his plate. Really, Mother? We're doing this again. I'm sure I don't know what you mean, darling. Augusta's voice was honey-sweet, but her knuckles were white around her wine glass. I glanced at Grant, hoping for support, but he was studying his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Typical. 10 years of marriage, and he still couldn't stand up to her. Actually, I said, setting down my fork, I'd love to learn more about the family business. Maybe I could help with some of the administrative work. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Augusta's smile never wavered, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. "Oh, Lila," she said, "you have your little perfume shop to worry about. We wouldn't want to overwhelm you with matters beyond your expertise." Before I could respond, Gerald cleared his throat. "The business is doing fine, Lila. No need to concern yourself." His voice was quiet, but there was something in his tone, a warning. Besides, Augusta continued, "We're here to discuss the charity gala next month. I expect everyone to attend." She looked pointedly at Everett. "Everyone." "Can't," Everett said. "I have plans." "Cancel them." Augusta's tone left no room for argument. "The Sinclair family presents a united front. Isn't that right, Grant?" Grant finally looked up. "Of course, Mother." I felt sick. The letter in my purse seemed to burn against my leg. As Augusta launched into details about table arrangements and guest lists, I excused myself to use the bathroom. In the hallway, Everett caught up with me. "Hey, you okay?" "Fine," I lied. "Just needed some air." He glanced back toward the dining room. "Listen, be careful asking about the business." "Mom's protective." "Why? What's she hiding?" "Let's just say Marissa asked similar questions before." He trailed off, jaw tightening. "Just watch yourself." Back at the table, Augusta was showing Gerald something on her phone. The caterer sent the most wonderful proposals, though I noticed Marissa's new company submitted a bid. She deleted something with a decisive tap. Shame about their reputation for unreliability. I saw Everett's hands clench under the table. So that's how Augusta operated. Death by 1,000 cuts, each one precisely aimed. "Actually," I said, surprising myself, "I've heard great things about Marissa's work. Maybe we should consider." "I've made my decision." Augusta's tone was final. "Now, about the seating arrangements." The rest of dinner passed in a blur of passive-aggressive comments and loaded silences. As we prepared to leave, Augusta pulled me aside. "Lila, dear, a word?" She led me into her study, closing the door. "I hope you understand that family loyalty is everything to us Sinclairs." "Of course." "Good." She adjusted a photo on her desk, the whole family at Christmas, everyone smiling like they meant it. It would be tragic if anything threatened that harmony. Especially now, with you and Grant trying for a baby. My blood ran cold. We hadn't told anyone about that yet. "How did you?" "I make it my business to know everything that affects this family." She patted my cheek. "Sleep well, dear." I left the study feeling like I'd just been threatened in a language I was only beginning to understand. But as I drove home, the letter burning a hole in my purse, I made a decision. If Augusta wanted to play games, fine. But I wasn't going to be another pawn on her board. I needed to talk to Marissa. Finding Marissa wasn't hard. What was hard was explaining to Grant why I needed to leave work early to meet a friend for coffee. He didn't ask who. He never did, but his silence spoke volumes. The cafe was tucked away in a part of town the Sinclairs would never visit. Marissa sat at a corner table, looking nothing like the polished society wife I remembered from old family photos. Her hair was shorter, her clothes more relaxed. She looked happier. "I almost didn't come," she said as I sat down. "But Everett said it was important. Thank you for meeting me." I pulled out the letter, now creased from constant handling. "I need to understand what happened to you." Marissa read it, her face growing tight. "Where did you get this?" "It just showed up. But after last night's dinner, I think." "Let me guess," she interrupted. "Augusta's starting to show her teeth?" I nodded, remembering the study conversation. "She knows things she shouldn't." "About me and Grant trying for a baby?" "Of course she does." Marissa's laugh was bitter. "She probably has the house bugged. Wouldn't put it past her." A server brought our coffees. I waited until he left before asking, "What really happened between you and Everett?" "I found something in the company books." "Discrepancies." She stirred her coffee endlessly. Large amounts of money moving through shell companies. When I asked questions, she shrugged. Suddenly there were rumors about me. Affairs, gambling debts. Augusta's specialty, death by reputation. My hand shook as I reached for my cup. And Everett? Augusta gave him a choice. Stand by his troubled wife or protect the family name. Her voice cracked slightly. He chose wrong. Took him 2 years to realize it. I need proof, I said. Something concrete. Marissa pulled out her phone, typed something. Check your email. It's everything I managed to save before they locked me out. But Lila, her eyes met mine. Be careful. Augusta doesn't just destroy careers. She destroys families. Back at home, I waited until Grant left for his evening run before logging into his laptop. His password was still our wedding date, something Augusta would hate. The files Marissa sent were complex, but a pattern emerged. Money disappearing from company accounts, reappearing in offshore holdings. All authorized by Augusta. I was so absorbed I didn't hear the front door. What are you doing? I jumped. Grant stood in the doorway, still in his running clothes, face unreadable. I can explain. Are those company files? He moved closer, saw Marissa's email. You met with Marissa? Behind my back? Someone had to ask questions, I said, standing. Your mother is stealing from the company, Grant. These documents prove it. Those documents are confidential. His voice was cold, distant. And Marissa is bitter about her divorce. You can't trust her. Can we trust your mother? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's it hurt. You don't understand. Family is everything to her. Family? I laughed. She's destroying this family. Ask Everett. Ask your father why he can barely look at her anymore. Stop. His hands clenched. Just stop. Delete those files. Forget about this. Or what? She'll destroy me like she destroyed Marissa? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, Grant spoke. I need some air. He grabbed his keys and left without looking back. I sat there, staring at the screen, until my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check the 3rd floor storage room at the office. Gee. Gerald. The quiet one. The watcher. I looked at the front door Grant had slammed, then back at the phone. I had a choice to make. Stay safe in my marriage's comfortable lies, or dig deeper and risk everything. I grabbed my car keys. Sometimes the only way forward is through the fire. The office building would be empty this late. And I still had the key card Grant had given me last Christmas, another thing Augusta didn't know about. At least, I hoped she didn't. The 3rd floor storage room smelled like old paper and secrets. My hands trembled as I used Grant's keycard, half expecting alarms to blare. Instead, only silence greeted me as I slipped inside. Filing cabinets lined the walls, their labels faded with age. I pulled out my phone to use as a flashlight, and that's when I saw it, a manila envelope sitting on top of the nearest cabinet, as if someone had left it there just for me. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Augusta at various meetings, shaking hands with men I didn't recognize. Dates stamped in the corners. 2019, just like the letter had mentioned. But it was the last photo that made my blood run cold. Augusta standing in what looked like a hotel lobby with Gerald's brother, Thomas. The same Thomas who had supposedly died in a boating accident that year. My phone buzzed, making me jump. A text from Grant. Where are you? I didn't reply. Instead, I took pictures of everything with shaking hands. As I reached to put the envelope back, I knocked something off the cabinet. A small recorder hit the floor, its back popping open. The voice that played was Gerald's. Can't keep covering for you, Augusta. Thomas knows about the money. He's threatening to go to the board. Augusta's reply was ice cold. Handle it. Whatever it takes. I didn't spend 30 years building this family to have your idiot brother destroy everything. The recording ended. My mind raced. Thomas hadn't died in an accident. He'd been silenced. And Gerald. Gerald knew. The lights suddenly flickered on. I spun around to find Grant in the doorway, his face a mask of confusion and betrayal. I followed you, he said quietly. What are you doing here? Listen to this. I held out the recorder. Your mother. Stop. He held up a hand. Just stop. Do you have any idea what you're doing? What this could do to our family? Family? I laughed, the sound sharp and foreign. Your Uncle Thomas was family. Did you know about him too? Grant's face went pale. What are you talking about? I showed him the photo. His hands shook as he took it. This is impossible, he whispered. He died. We had a funeral. Your mother lied. She's been lying about everything. I touched his arm. Grant, please. Help me understand what's happening. He stared at the photo for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes were different, harder, older somehow. We need to go, he said. Now. But the evidence. Leave it. Please, Lila. Trust me. We drove home in silence, the weight of unspoken words filling the car. As we pulled into our driveway, Grant finally spoke. Mom called while I was looking for you. She's coming over tomorrow morning. Says she wants to discuss our future in the family business. My stomach dropped. She knows. Probably. He turned off the engine but didn't move. Whatever you found tonight. We can't use it. The cost would be too high. Higher than letting her get away with what she did to Thomas? Grant's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. You don't understand what she's capable of. Then help me understand, I pleaded. Because right now, I'm watching my husband choose his mother's lies over the truth, and I don't know how to live with that. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. The distance between us felt infinite. I need time to think, he said finally. I got out of the car, my voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. Time won't change what's true, Grant. And tomorrow morning. Your mother is going to walk through our door expecting me to choose between my marriage and my conscience. I looked back at him. Still sitting in the dark car. I just hope I'm not the only one who has to make that choice. I went inside alone, leaving him with his silence and his mother's secrets. Tomorrow would bring either truth or destruction. Maybe both. But tonight, I had evidence of murder in my phone and a husband who couldn't decide if he was my ally or my enemy. Sleep wasn't going to come easily. Augusta arrived at 8 sharp the next morning, perfectly coiffed despite the early hour. Grant had spent the night in the guest room, and the silence between us hung like smoke in the air. Darling, Augusta breezed past me, not waiting for an invitation. Gerald sends his regrets. He's feeling under the weather. Her eyes flickered around our living room, lingering on the family photos. Where's Grant? On cue, he emerged from upstairs, looking like he hadn't slept. Mother. Wonderful. Shall we discuss your future? She settled onto our couch like it was her throne. The doorbell rang again. Augusta's smile tightened as Everett walked in. Sorry I'm late, he said, though I hadn't known he was coming. Traffic. Augusta's fingers drummed against her purse. I wasn't aware this was a family meeting. Oh! Everett sat beside me. Funny, since we're discussing family business. Before Augusta could respond, another figure appeared in our doorway. Marissa. My heart stopped. What is she doing here? Augusta's voice could have frozen hell. I invited her, Everett said. Since we're talking about the future of the company, I thought we should include everyone who knows its secrets. Including Uncle Thomas's. The temperature in the room plummeted. Grant stepped forward. Everett, don't. Don't what? Marissa interrupted. Don't mention how your mother orchestrated Thomas's disappearance? Or how she's been embezzling money through shell companies for years. Augusta laughed, but something cracked in her perfect facade. These accusations are ridiculous. Grant, surely you don't believe. Show them, I said quietly, pulling out my phone. Show them the photos, Grant. Tell them what we found. Grant stood frozen between his mother and me, the weight of 30 years of loyalty crushing him. Grant, Augusta's voice turned soft, dangerous. Remember who you are. What this family means. What this family means? Everett stood. This family means lies, manipulation, and murder. Dad knows it too. Why do you think he's really not here today? Augusta's hand flew to her throat. Gerald would never. He left the evidence, I said. In the storage room. He wanted us to find it. You ungrateful little. Augusta started toward me, but Marissa stepped between us. "I've already sent copies to the board," Marissa said. "And the police." "It's over, Augusta." The silence that followed was deafening. Augusta's perfect mask crumbled, revealing something desperate and dangerous underneath. "Grant," she whispered. "Tell them they're wrong. Tell them what a good mother I've been." Grant looked at me, then at his mother. 10 years of marriage against a lifetime of manipulation. "I saw the photos," he said finally. "I heard the recording. Uncle Thomas. Everything I did was for this family." Augusta's voice rose. "Thomas would have destroyed us. Just like she's destroying us now." She pointed at me, hands shaking. "I won't let you tear apart what I've built." She reached into her purse. The metal of the small revolver caught the morning light. "Mother." Grant moved toward her, but she stepped back. "Nobody moves," she said. Her hand was steady now, the gun aimed at my chest. "Lila, darling, you're going to delete those photos. Then you're going to tell the board it was all a mistake. A misunderstanding." "Augusta," Everett's voice was careful, measured. "Think about what you're doing." "I have thought about it. For 30 years, I've thought about nothing but protecting this family." Her finger tightened on the trigger. "And I won't stop now." I met her eyes, saw the fear behind the fury. "You're right," I said softly. "Family is everything. That's why Gerald left the evidence. Because sometimes protecting your family means saving them from themselves." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Augusta's hand trembled. "Mother," Grant said, "please." The gun wavered. In that moment, I saw our futures balancing on a knife's edge, justice or tragedy, truth or lies, family or destruction. The choice wasn't mine anymore. It was Augusta's. And she was finally out of moves. The police arrived just as Augusta pulled the trigger. The gun clicked empty. Gerald had thought of everything, even removing the bullets. As they led her away in handcuffs, she didn't scream or fight. She just smiled at me, that same perfect society smile she'd worn at every family dinner. "You'll never be one of us," she said softly as they escorted her past. "Remember that." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of police statements and reporters camping outside our house. Grant hadn't said more than 2 words to me since they took his mother away. He just sat in his study, staring at old family photos like they might reveal some hidden truth. I found him there late that night, an empty whiskey glass in his hand. "The board called," he said without looking up. "They're suspending everyone involved pending investigation. Including me." "Grant, don't." His voice was flat. "Just don't." A knock at the front door saved me from responding. Gerald stood on our porch, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "May I come in?" Grant didn't move from his study, so I led Gerald to the kitchen. He pulled out a thick envelope. "Thomas is alive," he said without preamble. "In witness protection." These are his sworn statements about what really happened. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. "Why now? Why didn't you stop her years ago?" "Fear." Gerald's voice cracked. "Not of Augusta, of losing everything. The family, the business, my son's respect." By the time I realized the cost of my silence, it seemed too late. "It's never too late for the truth," I said, but the words felt hollow. "Isn't it?" Grant appeared in the doorway. "The truth just destroyed our family, Lila. Are you happy now?" "Grant," Gerald started, but Grant cut him off. "Save it. You're as guilty as she is. You watched her destroy people for years and did nothing." He turned to me. "And you. You couldn't leave well enough alone. Had to play detective, had to be the hero. Your mother tried to kill me. Because you backed her into a corner." The whiskey glass shattered against the wall. "Everything she did for us. And now what do we have? A mother in jail, a family in shambles, and a wife who chose revenge over loyalty." "It wasn't revenge," I whispered. "It was justice." "Justice?" He laughed bitterly. "Tell that to the hundreds of employees who will lose their jobs when this scandal breaks. Tell that to the charities we support. Tell that to our unborn children who will carry this shame." The mention of children hit me like a physical blow. We'd been trying for months, dreaming of a family. Now those dreams felt like ashes in my mouth. "I'm going to stay with Everett," Grant said, already moving toward the door. I need time. Grant, please. I reached for him, but he pulled away. You won, you war, Lila. Congratulations. I hope it was worth it. The door closed behind him with devastating finality. Gerald touched my shoulder gently. He'll come around, he said. The truth has a way of settling in, given time. But as I stood in my empty kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage and the weight of Augusta's final smile, I wasn't so sure. I'd started this journey seeking justice, thinking the truth would set us all free. Instead, it had shattered everything I loved. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You should have listened to Augusta. This isn't over. The Sinclairs protect their own. I showed it to Gerald, watching his face pale. Augusta has friends in high places, he said quietly. Powerful friends who owe her favors. Maybe we were wrong to think this would end with her arrest. The truth hit me then. I hadn't won anything. I just started a war I wasn't sure I could finish. And now I had to face it alone. Outside, another car pulled up to our house. Through the window, I could see men in expensive suits stepping out, carrying briefcases that probably contained more threats than legal papers. The real battle was just beginning. The visiting room at the county jail smelled like despair and cheap coffee. Augusta sat across from me, still elegant in her orange jumpsuit, her perfect posture unchanged by 3 days of incarceration. I wondered when you'd come, she said, folding her hands on the metal table. Have you enjoyed watching my family fall apart? Your family? I leaned forward. You mean the one you've been manipulating for decades? The one you tried to kill me to protect? She smiled that razor-sharp smile. And yet here you are, alone. Where's Grant? Still hiding at Everett's. The jab hit its mark, but I kept my face neutral. I'm here because your powerful friends are threatening the people I love. It stops now. Does it? Augusta's eyes glittered. You know, I've had time to think in here. About choices, consequences. About what makes a family strong. She pulled out a folded paper from her pocket. Sign this. I read it quickly, a statement recanting everything, claiming I'd fabricated the evidence out of jealousy and spite. Never. Then the board will receive proof tomorrow that Grant was involved in the embezzlement. His signature is on quite a few documents. Her voice softened. He'll go to prison, Lila. Is your truth worth that? My hands shook. You'd destroy your own son? I'd do anything to protect this family, even from itself. She pushed the paper closer. Sign it. Save your marriage. Give your future children a father instead of a cautionary tale. The door opened behind me. Grant walked in. Augusta's mask slipped for just a moment. Darling. I heard everything, Mother. His voice was ice. The guards let me listen in. They're recording this conversation. She recovered quickly. Then you understand what's at stake. What she's doing to us. What you're doing to us, he corrected. I found Uncle Thomas. The color drained from Augusta's face. He told me everything, Grant continued. About how you threatened his family when he discovered the embezzlement. How you forced him into hiding. How you've been blackmailing Dad for years. I did it for you. Augusta's composure cracked. Everything I built, every person I removed, it was all to give you boys the perfect family I never had. Perfect? Grant laughed bitterly. You drove Everett away, terrorized Marissa, nearly destroyed my marriage. That's not family, Mother. That's control. You ungrateful. She lunged across the table, but guards were already moving in. One more thing, I said as they restrained her. Those powerful friends you mentioned? They just got subpoenas from the FBI. Turns out Gerald kept very detailed records. Augusta's face contorted. Gerald? My Gerald. He loved you enough to stop you, Grant said quietly. That's what real family does. As they led Augusta away, she turned back one last time. You'll regret this. Both of you. You have no idea what it takes to keep a family together. No, Mother, Grant called after her. We know exactly what it takes. The truth. In the parking lot, Grant and I stood in awkward silence. I'm sorry, he finally said, for not believing you. For choosing her lies over your truth. I'm sorry too. for not understanding what this would cost you. He took my hand, tentative. What happens now? Now. I squeezed his hand. We build something real. Something honest. My phone buzzed. A text from Everett. Board meeting tomorrow. They're voting to restructure. Clean slate. A clean slate, Grant echoed, reading over my shoulder. Think we can handle that? I thought about Augusta's perfect facade, about the cost of lies and the weight of truth. About family. Not the kind you're born into, but the kind you choose to build. Together, I said. We'll build it together. Behind us, Augusta's empire was crumbling. But from its ashes, something stronger could grow. Something true. The war was over. Now came the hard part, peace. 6 months later, I stood in Augusta's study, boxing up the last remnants of her carefully curated life. The trial had ended quickly. Too many paper trails, too many witnesses. Now the mansion was being sold, its proceeds going to repay the people she'd hurt. Found something interesting, Gerald said from the doorway, holding a leather-bound book. Augusta's diary. Started the day we got married. I took it carefully, the pages crackling with age. The first entry read, "Today I became a Sinclair. I will never be powerless again." She was 19 when her family lost everything, Gerald said quietly. Spent a year in poverty before meeting me. I thought I was rescuing her. Turns out she was building a fortress. And you sent me that first letter, I said. It wasn't a question anymore. He nodded, watching her destroy Marissa and Everett's marriage. I couldn't let it happen again. But I was too much of a coward to act directly. You're here now, I said, touching his arm. That counts for something. Footsteps echoed through the empty house. Grant appeared with another box, Everett behind him. Mom's lawyer called, Grant said. She wants to see us. All of us. The prison visiting room felt smaller this time. Augusta had lost weight, her perfect posture slightly stooped. But her eyes were clearer than I'd ever seen them. I've been in therapy, she said without preamble. Apparently, I have control issues. A ghost of her old smile flickered. Who knew? Nobody laughed. I won't ask for forgiveness, she continued. But I want you to understand. Everything I did, the manipulation, the lies, it started with love. Twisted, broken love, but love nonetheless. Love doesn't excuse what you did to Thomas, Everett said. To Marissa. To all of us. No, it doesn't. Augusta's hands trembled slightly. But it's why I'm signing over everything. The remaining assets, the family trusts, they're yours now. All of you. She looked at me. Even you, Lila. You were right about one thing. Family is what we choose to build. Grant tensed beside me. Why now? Because control is a prison, she said simply. And I've had enough of prisons. Later that night, in our new home across town, I found Grant in the nursery we'd started planning. The walls were half-painted, hope mixed with uncertainty. She'll never meet her grandchild, he said, hand resting on my slightly swollen belly. Not directly, anyway. No, I agreed. But maybe that's better. We get to build something new. My phone buzzed. A text from Marissa. Everett proposed. Again. Said second chances come from telling the truth. You started something, Lila. I showed Grant the message. He smiled, really smiled, for the first time in months. Truth as a foundation, he mused. Novel concept for a Sinclair. Former concept, I corrected. We're building our own legacy now. A week later, a package arrived. Inside was Augusta's perfume bottle, Chanel No. 5, and a note. For your daughter. Tell her the truth about me, all of it. Some legacies are warnings, not inspirations. I placed the bottle on a high shelf, visible but out of reach. Like Augusta herself now, a reminder, not a threat. The scent lingered faintly in the air, mixing with the fresh paint and new beginnings. That night, I dreamed of family dinners without hidden agendas, of children growing up without the weight of perfect facades, of truth as a gift rather than a weapon. But in the dream, Augusta's smile still haunted the edges, reminding me that the line between protection and control, between love and possession, was thinner than I'd once believed. Maybe that was the real legacy she'd left us, not the fortune or the family name, but the understanding that every family carries its shadows. The choice isn't whether to acknowledge them, but what to build in spite of them. In the end, that's what revenge gave way to, not destruction, but reconstruction. A chance to build something true from the ashes of necessary endings. The war was over. The healing had begun. And somewhere between justice and mercy, we'd found our way home.
The call came while I was elbow-deep in soapy water, trying to scrub dried spaghetti sauce off Ava's favorite princess plate. My phone buzzed against the kitchen counter, my mother's name flashing on the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail. I already knew what she wanted. My name is Lila, and I've spent most of my life being the responsible one, the reliable daughter who's supposed to fix everything. Sometimes I wonder if that's all I am to them, a human ATM with a guilty conscience. Lila, sweetheart. My mother's voice carried that familiar urgent tone. I hate to ask, but Tessa's new treatment plan. I closed my eyes, gripping the edge of the sink. Behind me, I could hear Ava giggling with Rosa, our nanny, as they played with her stuffed animals. The sound of my daughter's laughter used to make everything better, but lately, it just reminded me of how much I needed to protect her from becoming part of this cycle. How much? I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. 15,000, my mother said quickly, as if saying it faster would make it hurt less. The insurance won't cover it, and you know your father's business hasn't been doing well. I thought about the college fund I'd started for Ava, and how every extra dollar I made went straight into it. Since Mark died 2 years ago, I'd been careful with our money, making sure we'd be okay. But 15,000? That wasn't careful money. That was survival money. Mom, I can't. Not this time. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then came the guilt trip, right on schedule. Your sister needs this, Lila. She's been so sick, and you know how fragile she is. I thought after what happened with Mark, you'd understand how precious life is. My hand tightened around the phone, using Mark's death to manipulate me. That was a new low, even for her. Don't, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Don't you dare use Mark to guilt me into this. I'm not trying to guilt you into anything, she protested, but we both knew better. Tessa's your only sister. Family helps family. I watched as Rosa helped Ava put on her tiny backpack, getting ready for their afternoon walk. My daughter looked up at me with Mark's eyes, and something inside me finally snapped. What about when I needed help? I asked quietly. When Mark died and I could barely get out of bed. When I needed someone to watch Ava, so I could go to grief counseling. Where was family helps family then? That was different, my mother said dismissively. Tessa was going through a particularly bad spell. She always is, Mom. There's always a reason why Tessa needs help more than I do. I don't understand why you're being so selfish. My mother's voice turned cold. After everything we've done for you. I laughed, a hollow sound that surprised even me. Everything you've done for me? Name one thing, Mom. One thing you've done for me that didn't somehow end up being about Tessa. The silence stretched between us like a rubber band about to snap. When my mother spoke again, her voice was trembling with anger. Well, if that's how you feel, maybe you should take some time to think about your priorities. Your sister could die without this treatment, Lila. I hope you can live with that on your conscience. The call ended, and I stood there, staring at my reflection in the window above the sink. I looked tired, worn down by years of being the family backup plan. But there was something else in my eyes now, a spark of defiance that reminded me of Mark. Mama, Ava tugged at my pants leg. We go park now. I picked her up, breathing in her sweet baby shampoo smell. Yes, baby. Let's go to the park. Rosa, would you mind if I joined you today? As we walked to the park, I made a decision. It was time to stop being the family ATM, the guilty daughter, the reliable fix-it-all. It was time to be something else, something stronger. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. I didn't answer it. 3 days after my mother's call, I found myself standing on my parents' doorstep, Ava's small hand in mine. I'd promised myself I wouldn't come, but guilt is a powerful motivator, something my family has always known how to exploit. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, looking exhausted but somehow still managing to wear that expression of disappointed expectation I knew so well. "Oh, you brought Ava," she said, her tone suggesting this was somehow inconvenient. "Tessa's resting in the living room. She's had such a difficult morning." Of course she was. Tessa was always having a difficult morning, especially when there were important discussions to be had about money. The living room looked like a hospital suite had exploded inside it. Pillows everywhere, medication bottles lined up on the coffee table, and my sister sprawled dramatically on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She barely glanced up when we entered. "Aunt Tessa." Ava ran toward her, but my mother intercepted her. "Careful, sweetie. Aunt Tessa isn't feeling well today." I watched Tessa suddenly put down her phone and press a hand to her forehead. "Oh, my head is killing me. Mom, could you get me some water? And maybe those new pills Dr. Matthews prescribed." My father sat in his usual armchair, hidden behind his newspaper. He lowered it slightly when I entered, giving me a weak smile that didn't reach his eyes. "So," my mother said, returning with Tessa's water, "have you reconsidered about helping with the treatment?" I took a deep breath. "Actually, I wanted to talk about that. I've been looking into this new treatment you mentioned, and I can't find anything about it online. Which clinic is offering it?" The room went quiet. Too quiet. Tessa suddenly became very interested in adjusting her blanket. "Well," my mother began, "it's more of an experimental treatment. Dr. Matthews says." "Dr. Matthews?" I interrupted. "The same Dr. Matthews who prescribed those special supplements last year that turned out to be regular vitamins marked up by 500%. You always do this," Tessa's voice cracked with practiced precision. "You always try to make it seem like I'm making things up. Like I'm not really sick. That's not what I'm saying." "Yes, it is." Tessa sat up, tears already forming. "You're just jealous because Mom and Dad have to spend more time taking care of me. You've always been jealous." My father rustled his newspaper uncomfortably. "Girls, please." "Jealous." I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. "Tessa, I just found out you used the money I lent you last month, money that was supposed to be for your emergency medication, to book a spa weekend with your friends." I saw the pictures on Instagram. The room froze. My mother's face went pale, while Tessa's flushed red. "You're stalking my social media now? Your account is public, Tessa. And you tagged the spa." My mother stepped between us. Tessa needed that relaxation for her health. "The stress has been." "Stop it." I cut her off. "Just stop. Do you know what I could have done with that money? Ava needs new winter clothes. Her preschool tuition is due next month. But instead, my sister needed a mud bath and a seaweed wrap. You have no idea what it's like to be sick all the time." Tessa wailed. "And you have no idea what it's like to be a widow raising a child alone." The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. My father finally put down his newspaper. "Lila, that's enough." "No, it's not enough," I said, my voice shaking. "When Mark died, I needed my family. But Tessa had a migraine that week, remember? And the next week. And the week after that. That's not fair," my mother protested. "None of this is fair." I picked up Ava, who had been quietly playing with her stuffed rabbit in the corner. "I'm done. No more money, no more guilt trips, no more pretending this is normal." As I headed for the door, my mother called after me. "If you walk out now, don't expect us to be there when you need us." I turned back one last time. "Were you ever?" The drive home was quiet, except for Ava singing softly to her rabbit in the back seat. My phone kept buzzing with messages from my mother and Tessa, but I didn't need to read them to know what they said. The same old script, just with different words. But something had changed today. For the first time, I saw my family clearly. Not as I wished they were, but as they actually are. And sometimes that kind of clarity is worth more than any amount of money they could ask for. A week after my confrontation at my parents' house, I received an unexpected email from their bank. At first, I assumed it was spam. Why would their bank contact me? But the subject line made my stomach drop. "Past due notice, co-signed loan agreement." I hadn't co-signed any loans. My hands shook as I opened the email. There it was in black and white. My name on a $60,000 loan, supposedly signed 6 months ago. The same month Tessa had her emergency surgery that my parents had begged me to help with. I called the bank immediately, my voice trembling as I spoke with the representative. "There must be some mistake. I never signed any loan documents. We have the paperwork right here, Miss Grant. Your signature is on all the forms." My signature. But not signed by me. I drove to my parents' house in a daze, barely registering the familiar streets. When I pulled into their driveway, I noticed Tessa's new car parked outside, a luxury SUV that definitely hadn't been there during my last visit. My father answered the door this time, his face falling when he saw my expression. "Lila, this isn't a good time. Did you forge my signature on a loan application?" The color drained from his face. Behind him, I heard my mother's voice. "Richard? Who's at the door?" I pushed past him into the house. My mother stood in the hallway, while Tessa lounged on her usual spot on the couch, now scrolling through her phone on a brand new iPad. "You committed fraud," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You forged my signature and took out a loan in my name." My mother stepped forward, hands raised placatingly. "Sweetheart, we can explain. The $60,000 wasn't for medical bills, was it?" I looked at Tessa's new car through the window, then at her iPad. "It was for this. All of this. We had no choice," my father said quietly. "The bank wouldn't approve another loan in our names. We're already underwater on the mortgage because of me," Tessa interrupted, finally looking up from her device. "Just say it, Dad. Because you had to refinance the house to pay for my treatments." "Treatments?" I laughed bitterly. "Like that spa weekend? Or that designer handbag collection you posted about last week?" "You don't understand how hard it is," Tessa began, but I cut her off. "No, I understand perfectly now. You're not sick, Tessa. You're spoiled. And you too." I turned to my parents. "You're not just enablers anymore. You're criminals." My mother's face hardened. "Everything we've done has been for this family." "Family?" I pulled out my phone. "Should I call the police? Let them decide if fraud is a family value." "You wouldn't dare." Tessa sat up straight, real fear in her eyes for the first time. "Why not? Because we're family? Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't commit fraud. Family shows up when you're grieving your husband, not makes excuses about migraines." My father stepped between us. "Lila, please. We'll figure something out. We can sell the car, return things." "Too late," I said, my voice breaking. "The payments are already 3 months behind. My credit is ruined. Do you know what that means for Ava's future? For our stability?" "We'll fix it," my mother insisted. "Just give us time." "Time?" I pulled up the bank's email on my phone. "You have until tomorrow to get that loan transferred out of my name, or I'm going to the police. And don't think I'm bluffing. I have nothing left to lose." As I turned to leave, Tessa called out, "You're really going to destroy this family over money?" I stopped at the door, not turning around. "You all destroyed this family long ago. I'm just finally admitting it." Driving home, I called Rosa to check on Ava. Hearing my daughter's laughter in the background, I made a promise to myself. This ended now. No more manipulation, no more guilt, no more fraud. Tomorrow they'd either fix this or I'd fix it for them. Either way, something had to break. And for once, it wouldn't be me. The deadline came and went. No call from my parents, no transfer of the loan, just silence. I sat in my car outside the police station, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The manila folder on the passenger seat contained every document I needed to file charges: bank statements, forged signatures, evidence of fraud. My phone buzzed. A text from Rosa. "Ava asking for bedtime story. Coming home soon." Before I could reply, another message popped up from my father's business partner, James. "Need to talk. It's about your parents. Urgent." 20 minutes later, I sat across from James in a quiet coffee shop, watching him pull documents from his briefcase. His face looked grave, older than I remembered. "Your father doesn't know I'm showing you these," he said, sliding several papers across the table. "The business isn't just struggling, Lila. It's bankrupt. Has been for months." I stared at the numbers, the mounting debts, the bounced checks. But they just bought Tessa a new car, with money that should have gone to paying employees. James leaned forward. 3 months of missed payroll. People with families, mortgages. Your father's been taking out loans everywhere he can, trying to keep it afloat. While Tessa shops designer brands, I muttered. "There's more." James hesitated. "The business insurance lapsed last month. If anyone gets hurt on site." My stomach churned. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because your father saved my business 20 years ago when I was in trouble. But I can't help him now, not with the choices he's making." He stood up, straightening his tie. "Whatever you're planning to do about the fraud, just know everything it might impact." I sat there long after James left, staring at the documents. My phone kept buzzing. Rosa, wondering where I was. My mother, probably with more excuses. Tessa, surely playing victim again. Instead of answering any of them, I drove to my old neighborhood. The construction company's office was dark, but I used my old key to let myself in. The place smelled like sawdust and memories, summers helping Dad file papers, learning about building permits, dreaming about taking over someday. I found what I was looking for in the bottom drawer of Dad's desk: photo albums. Not the fancy ones Mom kept at home, but the real ones. Job sites, company picnics, employee celebrations. 20 years of people whose livelihoods depended on this business. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered. "Lila." My father's voice sounded small. The bank called about the loan. I know about the business, Dad. About everything. Silence stretched between us. Then, who told you? Does it matter? What matters is there are families who aren't getting paid while Tessa drives around in a new car. You don't understand. No, you don't understand. I cut him off. I'm not just protecting myself anymore. This isn't about family drama or playing favorites. There are innocent people getting hurt. Please, his voice cracked. Just give me time to fix this. I looked at the photos spread across his desk. Faces of people who trusted him, trusted this company. You have until tomorrow morning to tell Mom and Tessa the truth. About everything. Or I go to the police with all of it, the fraud, the missed payroll, everything. You'd destroy your own family? You're destroying families right now, Dad. I'm just deciding which ones to save. I hung up and drove home, where I found Rosa reading to a sleepy Ava. My daughter reached for me with heavy eyes, and I held her close, breathing in her baby shampoo smell. Bad day? Rosa asked quietly. Just complicated, I replied, watching Ava drift off in my arms. Sometimes doing the right thing feels an awful lot like betrayal. Rosa patted my shoulder as she gathered her things to leave. Sometimes betrayal is staying silent when we should speak up. I sat in the darkness with my sleeping daughter, thinking about choices and consequences, about the difference between revenge and justice. Tomorrow would change everything. Either way, there was no going back. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from Tessa. Whatever you're planning, don't. You'll regret it. I turned off my phone without replying. Some regrets, I was learning, were easier to live with than others. The next morning, I walked into my parents' house using my key, only to find Tessa already there, pacing the living room in designer workout gear she'd probably never used. Mom sat rigid on the couch while Dad stood by the window, looking years older than he had yesterday. Finally, Tessa spat. Come to destroy everything, have you? I placed my laptop on the coffee table, opening it to display the police department's website. I'm here to watch Dad tell the truth. All of it. Mom's face paled. Richard, what is she talking about? Before Dad could answer, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Martinez Construction, his largest client. His hands shook as he answered, walking into the kitchen for privacy. We all heard him anyway. What do you mean pulling out of the contract? We've worked together for 15 years. Tessa shot me an accusatory glare. What did you do? I didn't do anything, I replied truthfully. But secrets have a way of spreading. Dad returned, his face ashen. They're canceling all projects. Someone told them about the missed payroll. You did this, Mom pointed at me, her voice trembling. You're trying to ruin us. No, you did this, I countered, pulling out James's documents. Every time you chose Tessa's luxuries over paying employees. Every time you forged my signature instead of facing reality. Oh, here we go again, Tessa rolled her eyes. Poor overlooked Lila, always jealous of her sick sister. I laughed, a hollow sound that surprised even me. Sick. Show them, Tessa. Show them your medical records, the real ones, not the ones you've been faking. The room went deadly quiet. What is she talking about? Mom turned to Tessa, whose face had gone from angry to frightened. She's lying, Tessa whispered, but her hand unconsciously went to her purse, clutching it closer. Your daughter's been scamming you for years, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Those expensive treatments? Spa weekends? Those special medications? Shopping sprees. And you both enabled it, bankrupted Dad's company for it, committed fraud for it. That's not. Mom began, but I cut her off by reaching for Tessa's purse. Tessa yanked it away, but not before several prescription bottles fell out. Empty bottles with different doctors' names, different pharmacies. Dad picked one up, examining the label. This prescription. It's forged. Like my signature? I asked quietly. Mom stood up, swaying slightly. Tessa, tell them they're wrong. Tell them you're really sick. But Tessa's face had changed, morphing from fear to something harder, colder. What was I supposed to do? You both made it so easy, falling over yourselves to help poor, fragile Tessa. At least I got something out of being your daughter. The slap echoed through the room. Mom stood there, hand still raised, staring at Tessa's reddening cheek. The police are coming, I said into the silence. I called them this morning. They'll want to talk about the fraud, the forged prescriptions, everything. You'd send your own sister to jail? Dad asked, his voice breaking. No, I replied, standing up. I'm giving you one chance to fix this. Pay back the employees. Sell Tessa's car, her clothes, whatever it takes. Transfer that loan out of my name. Or I press charges against all of you. You can't do this to me, Tessa pleaded, suddenly looking very young and scared. "I'm your sister." "My sister died a long time ago," I said, gathering my things. "She died every time she watched me grieve alone, every time she took advantage of our parents' love, every time she chose greed over family." As I reached the door, Mom called out, "If you do this, you'll never see us again." I turned back one last time, seeing them all there, Mom's shocked betrayal, Dad's defeated slump, Tessa's mask finally cracking to show the scared girl beneath. "I haven't really seen you in years," I said softly. "I've just been looking at reflections of who I wished you were." The drive home felt longer than usual. My phone kept buzzing with texts from all of them, but I didn't need to read them. Sometimes the hardest part of revenge isn't executing it, it's living with the aftermath. 3 weeks after my ultimatum, I sat in my kitchen at midnight, staring at an eviction notice. The bank had frozen my accounts due to the fraud investigation, and my savings were depleted from covering the fraudulent loan payments. Even Rosa had to find other work. I couldn't afford her help anymore. My phone lit up with a text from James. "Your father filed for bankruptcy today. Thought you should know." I deleted it without responding, just like I'd deleted all the others. The news articles about the construction company's collapse. The desperate messages from my mother. Tessa's threats to tell everyone I'd ruined the family. Ava's cough echoed from her bedroom, the same cough she'd had for days. The pediatrician wanted tests, expensive ones our insurance might not cover now that everything was frozen. I pressed my palms against my eyes, fighting back tears. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw my mother standing there, alone. She looked smaller, somehow older. I opened the door but kept the chain on. "What do you want?" "Your father had a heart attack." The words hung between us like smoke. I found myself unlatching the chain before I could think better of it. "When?" "This morning. After the bankruptcy hearing." She wouldn't meet my eyes. "He's stable, but he keeps asking for you." "Don't," I warned, hearing the manipulation in her voice. "I'm not trying to." She stopped, sighing. "Tessa's gone." She emptied what was left in their accounts and disappeared. Left a note saying she's starting over somewhere else. Of course she had. Tessa always knew when to abandon a sinking ship. "I'm sorry about Dad," I said, starting to close the door. "But I can't. I know what I did wrong," Mom blurted out. "With you. With everything. I know now, and I'm sorry, but please." "He might not make it, Lila." Ava coughed again, harder this time. "Mom heard it." "Is she sick?" "I can't afford the tests," I admitted, hating the words, hating that I had to say them. "The accounts are frozen because of the fraud investigation, and the eviction notice came today, and I can't do this anymore." Mom reached for her purse, but I stopped her. "No. No more money between us. It's what poisoned everything in the first place. Then let me help with Ava. While you figure things out. I know I don't deserve it, but..." "You're right," I cut her off. "You don't deserve it. Where were you when Mark died? When I needed someone to watch Ava, so I could plan his funeral. When I cried myself to sleep every night for months. I was wrong," she whispered. "So wrong. But please don't punish your father for my mistakes. Don't punish Ava for them either." Ava appeared in the hallway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Mama, my chest hurts." I picked her up, feeling the heat of her fever through her pajamas. She needed a doctor. I needed help, but accepting help from them, it felt like giving up everything I'd fought for. "The guest room at the house is still yours," Mom said softly. "Just until you figure things out. No strings, no guilt. I'll stay with your father at the hospital if you want space." I looked at my daughter's flushed face, then at the eviction notice on the counter. Sometimes the hardest part of being strong is knowing when to bend. "One night," I said finally. "Just until I can get Ava to the doctor." Mom nodded, not pushing her luck. As she turned to leave, she paused. "I found Mark's old letters in the attic. The ones he wrote you in college. I never realized how much he saw in you. How much I failed to see." She left the letters on the counter and walked out, leaving me holding my feverish daughter and staring at the last pieces of the life I thought I'd built. Everything was falling apart, and I couldn't tell anymore if it was because of my revenge or in spite of it. Ava coughed again, burying her face in my neck. "Are we going to be okay, Mama?" I wished I could tell her yes. I wished I could be sure. Instead, I held her tighter and started packing an overnight bag, wondering if sometimes rock bottom is just another word for starting over. 2 days after moving back into my parents' house, I found Tessa sitting in the kitchen. She looked different. Expensive clothes replaced by a plain sundress, her perfectly styled hair now messy and natural. And she was obviously pregnant. "Surprise," she said flatly, resting one hand on her swollen belly. Guess we're both back home. I instinctively moved to block the stairs leading to where Ava was sleeping. What are you doing here? Same as you. Nowhere else to go. She smiled bitterly. Karma's funny like that, isn't it? Mom appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands. Tessa called from the bus station. Her husband left her, and she's. Let me guess, I cut in. She needs help. She needs money. She needs everyone to forget what she did and welcome her back with open arms. I lost everything, Tessa snapped. My husband, my home, my life. All because you couldn't keep your mouth shut about a few little white lies. White lies? I laughed. You bankrupted our father's company. He had a heart attack because of what you did. What we did, Mom corrected quietly. We all played our parts. Upstairs, Ava started coughing again. The sound seemed to startle Tessa, who flinched. Is that? She hesitated. Is she okay? Like you care, I said, turning to head upstairs. I do care. Tessa's voice cracked. I know I messed up, okay? I know I was selfish and horrible, and everything else you want to call me. But I'm trying to change. This baby, it's making me see things differently. I stopped, not turning around. Like how you saw things differently when Mark died. When I needed my sister, and you were too busy faking illnesses to show up at his funeral. I was scared, she whispered. Scared that if I stopped being the sick one, the special one, nobody would love me anymore. And now I'm just scared. I finally turned to face her. In the harsh kitchen light, I could see the dark circles under her eyes, the tear stains on her cheeks. She looked like the little sister I used to know, before everything went wrong. Mom says you're staying in the guest room, Tessa continued. I can take the couch. No, I said firmly. This isn't happening. We're not playing happy family while Dad's in the hospital and everyone pretends the past never happened. Lila, please. Mom stepped forward. She's pregnant, she has nowhere else to go. And whose fault is that? I demanded. You taught her that there would always be a safety net, always be someone to clean up her messes. Well, I won't do it anymore. Not for her, not for you. Then do it for this baby, Tessa pleaded, tears falling now. Don't let my child suffer for my mistakes. The irony hit me like a slap. Like you let Ava suffer? Like you let me suffer? Some mistakes don't get second chances, Tessa. Ava's coughing grew worse upstairs. As I turned to go to her, Tessa grabbed my arm. I found Mark's letters too, she said quickly. The ones from when I was really sick as a teenager. He wrote to me every week while I was in the hospital, even though he barely knew me. Just because I was your sister. I jerked away from her touch. Don't you dare use Mark. He believed in second chances, she pressed on. He believed people could change. You used to believe that too, before I ruined everything. Upstairs, Ava called out for me. The sound seemed to echo through the kitchen, through years of hurt and betrayal and missed chances. You have until Dad comes home from the hospital, I said finally. Then you need to figure out your own life. I won't let Ava grow up watching this cycle repeat itself. As I headed upstairs, I heard Tessa start to cry. Real tears this time, not the manipulative ones I'd grown so used to. Mom murmured something comforting to her, and for a moment, I almost turned back. Almost. But some bridges, once burned, leave scars too deep to cross again. The trick is learning which ones are worth rebuilding, and which ones should stay in ashes. 6 months later, I stood in my new apartment, watching Ava arrange her stuffed animals on her bed. The place was smaller than our old home, but it was ours, really ours, with no strings or guilt attached. The bank had finally unfrozen my accounts after Dad testified about the fraud. He'd taken responsibility for everything, protecting Tessa one last time. She'd disappeared again 2 days after he came home from the hospital, leaving only a note saying she was checking into a real treatment center this time. Mom still sent me updates about her progress, though I never responded. The doorbell rang. Rosa stood outside, holding a casserole dish. I was in the neighborhood, she said, though we both knew she'd driven across town. How is the Pequeña's cough? Better. I let her in, watching as Ava ran to hug her. The new medication helped. Rosa set the dish down and pulled an envelope from her purse. This came to your old address. I thought, maybe you should have it. I recognized Mark's handwriting immediately. The letter was dated 3 days before his accident, addressed to my parents. Where did you find this? Your mother gave it to me. Said it was time you had it. My hands trembled as I opened it. Dear Helen and Richard, I'm writing because I know how hard it is for Lila to stand up to you. She loves you, but that love shouldn't cost her herself. One day, she'll realize she's strong enough to choose her own happiness. When that day comes, please let her go. Some daughters need to break free to become who they're meant to be. Love, Mark. The doorbell rang again. This time my parents stood outside. Mom held a small package, while Dad leaned heavily on his cane, a permanent reminder of his heart attack. We're not staying, Mom said quickly, seeing my expression. We found these while packing up the house. She handed me the package. Inside were photos, ones I'd never seen before. Me and Tessa as kids before the manipulation started. Pictures of Mark and me that I thought were lost. Recent ones of Ava that I hadn't known they'd taken. The house sold yesterday, Dad said quietly. We paid back the employees first, like you asked. There's enough left to start over somewhere smaller. And Tessa, she's doing the work this time. Real work. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Sometimes it takes losing everything to find yourself. I thought about Mark's letter, about breaking free and becoming who you're meant to be. I can't go back, I said finally, to how things were, to who I was. We know, Dad replied. We're not asking you to. Mom reached into her purse, pulling out one last envelope. This is Tessa's new address. If you ever want to write to her, well, it's your choice. Everything is your choice now. They turned to leave, but Dad paused. We were wrong, Lila, about so many things, but we were most wrong about not seeing how strong you are. After they left, I sat with Rosa while Ava showed her new room layout. The envelope with Tessa's address sat unopened on the counter, a question I wasn't ready to answer. What will you do? Rosa asked softly. I looked at the photos, at Mark's letter, at my daughter playing freely without the weight of family dysfunction hanging over her. I'll keep them, I said, gathering the memories into a box. For Ava when she's older, so she knows where she came from, but also why we chose to go somewhere else. And Tessa's address? I picked up the envelope, feeling its weight. Some bridges need to stay burned, so we don't cross them again. But others. I tucked the envelope into the box without opening it. Others might be worth rebuilding someday. Just not today. Rosa nodded, understanding what I couldn't quite say. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying everything. Sometimes it's about building something new from the ashes. Something stronger and truer than what came before. Ava called me to see her finished room arrangement, and I left the box of memories behind. We had our own story to write now, one without guilt or manipulation or false obligations. One where we could both become who we were meant to be.